The dust swirled behind my Jeep as I drove down the winding, sun-baked path that cut through what my ex-husband's family once called Emily's Folly. The late afternoon light spilled across the red clay hills of southern New Mexico, casting long shadows from the sparse mesquite trees and scrub brush that dotted the barren land. What lay ahead was 1.2 million acres of so-called worthless desert, my unexpected inheritance. I'm Emily Torres, and 6 months ago, at 41, I became the owner of the largest privately held tract of land in New Mexico. Not that anyone thought it meant anything. Just sand and coyotes, my former father-in-law Carl scoffed at the reading of the will. Your grandfather must have been senile to keep dumping money into that wasteland. Even my ex-husband Aaron tried to be gentle, but couldn't hide the judgment. Maybe we should just offload it to one of those wind energy companies. It's not like you're going to turn it into a vacation spot. But I remembered the last time I'd visited Grandpa Lewis, just 3 weeks before he passed. He'd called me into his cluttered study, his hands frail but his eyes clear. From beneath a dusty bookshelf he pulled out a worn, leather-bound ledger. "Emmy," he said, using the nickname only he ever did, "I need your word. This land, it's meant for you. Not your cousins, not your Uncle Javier, you. Promise me you won't sell it. Not until you understand why it matters." I promised, though at the time, I had no idea what I was agreeing to. The ranch had been in our family for generations, but in all that time, it had never amounted to much. The soil was too alkaline to grow crops, the cattle operations always failed in the dry, unforgiving climate, and every mining company that ever surveyed the place walked away shaking their heads. But Grandpa Luis wasn't a romantic. He was a sharp, calculating man who built his fortune in land deals and urban redevelopment. He didn't cling to things for sentiment. So if he'd paid over $100,000 in annual taxes for 40 years, he had a reason. I just needed to find it. The first clue came about 3 months after I inherited the ranch. While sorting through Grandpa's old documents, I found a series of heavily redacted letters from the Department of Energy, dated back to the early 80s. Most of it was bureaucratic filler, but one phrase jumped out at me. Unusual subsurface composition. Site may require future containment protocols. Containment? Then came the second clue. Uncle Javier showed up unannounced at my condo in Albuquerque, wearing a forced grin and carrying a bottle of overpriced wine. "Hey," he said. "I've been thinking, that ranch is probably more trouble than it's worth for someone your age. Taxes, repairs. I'd be happy to take it off your hands. Say, $5 million? $5 million from the same man who called it useless dirt not 4 months earlier." That's when I knew something wasn't right. I dove into old property records and discovered a pattern. Every few years, different government departments, energy, interior, even defense, had run classified surveys on a particular 10-mile stretch of the land. After each one, a new LLC or shell company would quietly approach Grandpa with a generous offer. Every time, he refused. I hired a private geological consultant to scan public survey data and compare it with historical satellite readings. 3 weeks later, he sat across from me in a quiet Santa Fe cafe, his voice careful. "Miss Torres," he said, sliding his tablet across the table, "there are strong magnetic anomalies beneath a very specific area of your land. Readings we usually only see around certain types of secure installations. Whatever's under there, it's not natural, and someone's gone to a lot of trouble to make sure the public never finds out." Suddenly, Emily's Folly didn't seem so foolish anymore. Keep it quiet. That's when the pressure started. First came the official-looking notices, letters stamped with seals claiming environmental violations that would force me to sell the land. My attorney, a former federal prosecutor and a friend of my grandfather's, proved them fake within days. Next came threats to raise my property taxes to impossible levels. A formal complaint to the state comptroller made that little intimidation trick vanish overnight. Then it escalated. A fire broke out at the old ranch house, ruled accidental, but with no clear source. A week later, someone cut the perimeter fencing. Then came the anonymous calls, distorted voices warning me to take the offer while it's still available. They thought I'd back down, that I'd scare easily. They didn't know me. I'm my grandfather's granddaughter, and Luis Torres didn't raise a coward. That's why I was driving out to the ranch again, despite Aaron's worried protests. I had found something new in Grandpa's old ledger, tucked between pages worn thin by time. A hand-drawn map with GPS coordinates and a simple message scrawled in his familiar handwriting. Summer solstice, noon. The shadow tells the truth. Today was the summer solstice. I parked my Jeep near an old survey marker, the one Grandpa had drawn on the map. The sun was directly overhead, brutal and unrelenting. I stood at the exact coordinates. The ground looked no different than the rest of the desert, rocky, sun-bleached, unremarkable. But then, as the sun hit its zenith, I saw it. The shadows of the jagged rock formations surrounding me shifted, aligning in a straight line, pointing toward what looked like a naturally formed stone arch about a quarter-mile away. My heart pounded. I pulled out Grandpa's final letter, the one in the envelope marked, "Open when you find the arch." Inside was a single rusted key and a short note. "The truth is under the arch, but be careful who you trust, Emmy. Some secrets are worth more than money." I slung my backpack over my shoulder and began walking. Each step felt heavier, like I was carrying not just gear, but the weight of 4 generations of Torres legacy, all leading to this. The arch was smaller than I expected. 7 feet tall at most, weathered by time and wind. At its base, half hidden beneath a patch of desert brush, was something metal. A steel door, embedded in the rock face. My hands trembled as I inserted the key. It slid in easily, clicked. Then I heard footsteps. I spun around. 2 men in dark suits stood 10 feet away. They flashed government IDs. Their faces were unreadable. "Miss Torres," the taller one said smoothly, "we need to talk about your property. The United States government is prepared to offer you $50 million for immediate transfer of ownership." I looked at them, then at the door, then back across the seemingly barren land. "Gentlemen," I said, still gripping the key, "I think you'd better tell me what's really going on here." The 2 men exchanged a glance. The shorter one took a step closer, his tone firm but not unkind. "What's behind that door is a matter of national security. We've been trying to acquire this property through legal means for over 40 years. My grandfather turned you down," I said. The taller one nodded, because he understood what was at stake, and from the look in your eyes, I think you do too. I remembered Grandpa's words, "Some secrets are worth more than money." I turned the key. With a metallic hiss, the steel door released, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. I switched on my flashlight. The beam caught gleaming metal walls, something buried here that was far from ordinary. "Miss Torres," the taller agent, Collins said, his voice more urgent now, "before you go any further, you need to understand." But I had already stepped inside. Because this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. "What you're about to see is classified at the highest level," Agent Collins said firmly. I turned back to face them. "Then I suggest you start explaining. What exactly did my grandfather protect for 40 years? Agent Davis, the shorter of the 2, stepped forward. "In 1972, during a routine groundwater survey, your grandfather stumbled on something extraordinary. A massive underground deposit, not of oil or gas, of liquid helium-3. My breath caught. Helium-3. It was a rare isotope almost non-existent on Earth, vital for advanced nuclear fusion, cutting-edge quantum computing, and high-end medical imaging. On the open market, it was valued in the millions per liter." "How much?" I asked quietly, afraid of the answer. Agent Collins didn't blink. "Based on recent surveys, approximately 400 million liters, the largest known natural reserve on Earth." I did the math and nearly lost my balance. Trillions. It was worth trillions. I looked down at the cracked desert beneath my boots. The land my in-laws said was worthless. The land I'd been pressured to sell for scraps. Why didn't Grandpa tell anyone? "Because Luis Torres was a patriot," Agent Davis said softly. "He understood that if word of this got out, it could destabilize global markets, maybe even provoke war. So he made a deal with the U.S. government. He'd keep the land under the radar, pay the taxes, maintained the illusion of uselessness, and in return, ensured the resource was preserved until the world was ready. We moved deeper into the passage. The staircase led us into a massive chamber carved from bedrock. The walls were lined with sleek, humming equipment, sensors, monitors, sealed consoles. It was part science lab, part fortress, and every inch of it had been managed in secret. Your grandfather insisted on independent oversight, Agent Collins explained. He didn't trust the government blindly. All extractions are logged, verified, and monitored by a third-party auditing team. Nothing happens without full transparency. I ran my hand across one of the consoles, feeling the weight of history beneath my fingertips. He hadn't just guarded a valuable resource. He'd safeguarded how it would be used. The $50 million offer, I said, slowly turning toward the agents. It wasn't to buy the land, was it? Agent Davis shook his head. It was a test. If you accepted, we'd know you hadn't found the truth yet. But you passed. And now? Now, Agent Collins said, we make you the real offer, the same one your grandfather accepted, a partnership with the Department of Energy, controlled, transparent extraction, full compensation at market value, and joint oversight over where and how this helium-3 is used. I thought of my family, my smug in-laws, my dismissive uncle, even Aaron, who loved me but never believed in this land. They all thought I was clinging to a fantasy. I need time to consider, I said. Of course, Agent Collins replied. But Ms. Torres, this must remain confidential. National security is at stake. I understand, I said, cutting him off, but I'll have conditions of my own. The next week passed in a blur. I met with government officials behind closed doors, signed security agreements, and reviewed classified documents detailing decades of hidden operations. I even discovered my grandfather's personal correspondence with top scientists and military advisors. Then I arranged the family meeting. Everyone showed up, just as I expected. Carl and Elaine, my ever-critical in-laws, came with familiar smirks. Uncle Javier arrived looking smug, probably rehearsing another fake sincere offer. And Aaron, my husband, stood near the back, arms crossed, jaw tight. I chose the ranch house for a reason. 6 months earlier, they'd gathered here to mock my inheritance. Today they were back, but everything had changed. Thank you all for coming, I began, standing at the head of the same weathered dining room table where they once laughed at me. This time, they weren't laughing. I stood at the head of the old ranch house table, the same table where I was once told my inheritance was a burden. I've made a decision about the land, I said evenly. Finally, my former father-in-law Carl chuckled, leaning back smugly. So, you're finally seeing reason. I imagine those property taxes are crushing you. I smiled. Actually, I've decided to keep it. In fact, I just finalized a rather interesting contract regarding its future. Uncle Javier leans forward, his eyes narrowing. What kind of contract? A federal research partnership, I replied, sliding a thick, redacted document across the table. The blacked-out lines only made it more intimidating. It turns out this so-called worthless land has some very unique properties that have captured the attention of the Department of Energy. Chaos erupted. What are you talking about? That's outrageous. This isn't legal. I raised a hand. The specifics are classified. But I can tell you this. The ranch stays in my name, exactly as Grandpa wanted, and the compensation, I paused, savoring the moment, will more than cover the property taxes, for generations. How much? Aaron, my now estranged husband, demanded. The figure is confidential, I said, locking eyes with him. Let's just say, money won't be a concern for me. Ever. Carl's face turned the color of desert clay. You can't do this alone, Emily. You need professionals. Advisors. I have them, I interrupted, cool and steady. Grandpa made sure of it. He left very clear instructions. And now, I also have excellent partners in the federal government. As if on cue, Agents Collins and Davis stepped into the room, their federal badges clearly visible. Miss Torres, Agent Collins said formally, the survey team is ready when you are. The silence in the room was priceless. Javier suddenly looked decades older. Carl seemed to deflate, and Aaron just stared. Not with anger, not with confusion, with realization. "I'll be right there," I told the agents. Then I turned back to the room. "I think we're done here. I have a ranch to run." Everything changed after that. Over the next year, the Department of Energy quietly established a research facility on the property, masked as a solar energy operation. The first controlled helium-3 extraction began under strict oversight, exactly as Grandpa had outlined. My marriage didn't survive the shift. Aaron couldn't handle that his wife, the one he'd gently belittled for years, had suddenly outmaneuvered everyone. His family was worse, rotating between lawsuits and desperate attempts to win my favor. None of it worked. Grandpa had made sure they couldn't touch what mattered. Javier even tried challenging the will, claiming Grandpa had been mentally unfit. The case was dismissed the moment the government's legal team got involved. And still, to outsiders, the land looked useless, just sand, rocks, and rattlesnakes. But underground, it was powering the future. Helium-3 from the Torres Ranch was fueling quantum computing projects, fusion energy research, and experimental medical devices. I chaired the oversight board personally, ensuring every decision aligned with ethical guidelines. Not just profits, progress. Despite having wealth beyond anything I'd imagined, I chose to keep living in the old ranch house. There's something about a desert sunset that reorders your soul. Last week I found one final letter from Grandpa, tucked inside the cover of his old ledger. It was dated just days before he passed. "Dear Emmy, by now you've learned the truth about our worthless land. But the real treasure isn't helium-3. It's the lesson that one person, standing firm on principle, can still make a difference. I didn't choose you because you were my only grandchild. I chose you because you understand that real wealth isn't what you have, it's what you do with it. Some things are worth more than money. Take care of this secret, and remember, the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's proving the ones who believed in you right. Love, Grandpa." That night I sat on the porch, watching the sun disappear over 1,000,000 acres of quiet golden sand. A government helicopter passed in the distance, heading toward the research facility disguised beneath the solar farm. Another notification pinged on my phone. An investment offer from one of Carl's business partners. I deleted it without opening it. Some things are worth more than money. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't land or wealth, it's the strength you find in protecting what others never understood. And sometimes the best way to honor someone's belief in you is to become exactly the person they always knew you could be. The world saw this land as worthless. They were wrong. It wasn't worth millions. It was worth so much more. If you felt something reading my story, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told you were clinging to something worthless, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment. Tell me what you're fighting for, what dream you're protecting that no one else seems to understand. I read every word, and your voice matters more than you know. If you've ever stood alone in front of doubters, unsure but unwilling to back down, know that I've been there too. This land was called a mistake. I was called stubborn, naive, unrealistic. But it turns out they were wrong, and I was exactly who I needed to be. So if you believe in the quiet power of perseverance, in legacy, in doing the right thing even when no one's watching, stand with me, share this story, let someone else see that a so-called mistake can be a miracle in disguise. Here's what I've learned. Sometimes the things that look like burdens are actually the bridges to our greatest purpose. Don't give up just because it doesn't make sense to everyone else. Trust your instincts. Guard your vision. You don't need validation to be valuable. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's living a life so true to yourself, even your doubters go silent. The string quartet swelled as the bride stepped onto the vineyard lawn, her dress catching